Hi guys, I'm here with the last story for tonight. This section of the book is called Hospital Helpers. So I'm guessing it's a bunch of different stories put together of things that's happened in the hospital or whatever. So let's see. This is a Jewish folk saying, "One should not stand at the foot of a sick person's bed because that place is reserved for the guardian angel." Okay, so let's begin. Hospital Helpers. 10 days after Virginia Lee of Wauchula, Florida, made her first baby, the infant contracted meningitis. Had her first baby, not made her first baby, sorry. After she had her first baby, the infant contracted meningitis, which left her profoundly brain damaged. My prayer changed from "God, heal Brenda," to "Father, since I am unable to reach into Brenda's world, please be with her. Let your angels entertain her and show her the love I can't," says Virginia. The following years were difficult. Virginia met parents of handicapped children who were bitter and bereaved, but somehow she was able to love Brenda wholeheartedly. The hardest part was not being able to penetrate her daughter's veil. Due to the severe damage to her nervous system, Brenda cried constantly, and I was at a loss as to how to comfort her, Virginia says. Yet sometimes the crying would stop abruptly, and Virginia would rush in to find Brenda lying quietly, an enchanted expression on her face, as if she were daydreaming. At times she would even smile. During these moments, Virginia felt certain that someone was lovingly ministering to her daughter, that Brenda had inside information about heaven. But Virginia never knew for sure. Brenda died in a residential home when she was 25. As Virginia sat waiting for the doctor, a caregiver from the home came to Virginia. "I have something to tell you," she began hesitantly. Shortly before Brenda died, the caregiver had been going down the hall, and she reached the end. She turned and saw a dark-haired woman in a nurse's uniform walking toward Brenda's room. I knew she wasn't part of the staff, so I called to her. The worker explained, but she turned into Brenda's room without responding. The caregiver had hurried to the room, but no one was with Brenda. Virginia began to weep. All I could think to tell the caregiver was that she was witness to the answer to my 25-year-old prayer. Virginia says, Brenda had indeed been touched with the angels, and the one had come to take her safely home. Martha was devastated when she learned that her mother, Diane, had a terminal illness. She couldn't help but think it was unfair. Diane had been widowed at an early age, and as a single mother had struggled to raise Martha. Now Martha was happily married with a 4-year-old son, Michael, and Diane was just beginning to enjoy all the fruits of her labor. How could God let this happen? Martha wept. She felt abandoned. It would be a swift illness, the women were told. Given that Martha persuaded Diane to move in with her family, as the weeks wore on, everyone was glad for the arrangement. Diane's hospital bed was right in the center of the living room, and Michael could climb up and cuddle with Grandma whenever he wanted to. Hospice workers came in and out, and Martha kept quiet, music playing at all times. She and her mother had several loving talks, and all seemed ready. Martha, however, was still angry. Why hadn't God at least given her some comfort or acknowledged her pain? He and she used to have a close relationship, but Martha did not know where God was now. One late afternoon, Martha checked on her mother, who was sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed, and went into the kitchen to start dinner. Michael was in the basement playing with his toy cars. His play area was right at the foot of the steps, so Martha could hear him easily. Today, as usual, he was humming. Martha smiled. Michael was such a loving child. and wherever he went, he seemed to hum. With his song in the background, she got out the ingredients for the casserole. Just then she heard Michael calling to her. "Mommy," he shouted quite clearly up the steps. "The angels are here." Martha froze. "Angels? What are you talking about?" Martha started toward the basement door, and Michael called up again. "Never mind, Mommy. They're here for Grandma." Suddenly, Martha realized what Michael was saying, and she turned and ran into the living room. Her mother still appeared to be in deep sleep, but as Martha bent over the bed, she could see that Diane had slipped away, surely just a few minutes ago. "They're here for Grandma," Michael had announced, and she could hear him humming, back at play. Like many small children, he had no problem accepting the nearness of heaven. A feeling of peace swept over Martha as she bent and kissed her mother's cheek. Diane had not received a physical healing, but the angels had brought the family the reassurance that they needed, born through the eyes of a child. Stories abound about angels escorting us to heaven, but death is not only the time angels visit hospitals. Healing angels also seem to roam corridors, unseen except by a chosen few. Nurse and author Joyce Snell reports often seeing such a being flitting among the patients, and here and there laying their hand on the forehead of some sufferer. Often after waking from such a treatment, a patient has said to me, "Oh, nurse, I feel so much better this morning." Perhaps angels of mercy also disguise themselves as hospital staff members. In 1985, Linda Buttcaven underwent a difficult cancer operation at Nazareth Hospital in Philadelphia. In intensive care, she awoke to see a nurse near her bed, a plain young woman with gentle blue eyes and blonde hair that was pulled back in a bun. "I'm here to take care of you, Linda." The nurse bent over and affectionately rubbed Linda's cheek with her side of her hand. "You're going to be okay." Everything hurt, and Linda was frightened, but during the next few hours the nurse stayed nearby, talking gently to her. I sensed somehow that she was special, and a calmness seemed to cover me. The nurse didn't do medical procedures for her, although others did. The woman was simply there. Eventually, the nurse stroked Linda's cheek once more. "I must leave you now," she said softly, "but I promise you I will be with you again." "When?" Linda asked sleepily. The nurse said, "Soon." During the difficult days that followed, Linda kept watching for her special nurse, but the woman didn't return. After she was discharged, Linda and her husband went to the ICU to find the nurse, but the staff was at a loss. None of them had seen that woman with Linda, and no one fitting her description worked at any ICU shift. Linda had had several surgeries since, but she has never again met her special angel. Still, her loveliness has stayed with me, and I can picture her vitality. Linda says, "I hope that I will meet her and hug her in heaven." I'd say that was her guardian angel, and she'll see her again when it's her time to go. Margaret phoned KDKA Radio in Pittsburgh to share her story. A victim of a heart attack, she was being transported by ambulance to a hospital when she had a near-death experience. "I remember leaving my body and hovering above it, as others have described," she said. "I saw myself lying on the stretcher, with sirens screaming and people working over me, but I wasn't afraid. My body seemed like a thing, nothing to worry about. The feeling of peace was exquisite." Margaret thought that she might float away from the scene. Then she noticed that amid all the activity there was a young man sitting on a bench alongside her body, looking at her intensely. He was wearing a white shirt and pants, and an expression of deep concern, Margaret remembers. "He never took his eyes off me. I remember wondering why, with everyone else so busy, he was just sitting there." A moment later, however, instead of drifting away, Margaret felt herself slither back into her body. The scene she was watching disappeared, and she later awakened in the intensive care. Margaret recovered, and later she called the ambulance service to ask if they could look at their records and tell her who the young man was, but the records showed no man in attendance during Margaret's journey. All the people involved in her care had been women. In addition, no man matching the description was employed by the ambulance service, and the uniforms the workers wore were not white. I've always heard that angels keep their eyes on us from the moment we are created until they deliver us to God. Margaret said, "I'm glad to know that mine is on the job." Janice Reed agrees. She brought her 3-week-old daughter to Memorial Hospital in Shreveport, Louisiana, because of a serious stomach ailment. Technicians took the baby to be tested, and Janice went into the empty waiting room and collapsed, weeping. Her baby was so young. What was wrong with her? What if they couldn't cure her? Vaguely, Janice noticed someone enter the room and sit down next to her. She glanced up through her tears and saw a young man wearing a short white shirt, probably an orderly. But why was he gazing at her with such tenderness? His eyes, they were so bright, so kind. Janice felt mesmerized. "There's no need to cry," the man told her gently. "Your daughter is all right." "I can't help it, I'm scared," Janice sobbed. "You needn't be. She will grow up." He seemed definite about it, but the test had just begun. How would he know the diagnosis? How would he know the diagnosis already? Those eyes, that penetrating glaze, it was as if he was soothing her very soul. Janice seemed to be infused with grace, a sudden awareness that all would be well. "I've looked at your child," the man said, getting up. "Don't be afraid, she's going to be fine." He put his hand on Janice's shoulder, then turned and walked out of the room. Janice was alone again, but somehow not alone. A presence seemed to linger in the room. She was filled with peace. She was happy. A few minutes later, her doctor came in and told her that the baby needed surgery right away. Calmly, Janice carried her infant to the surgical ward. Only later, when surgery was over, and just as predicted, the baby was thriving, did Janice attempt to locate the man in white who had so unexpectedly supported her, but no physician or orderly matched his description, nor had any other parents been sent to the pediatric waiting room that morning. And hadn't he said he had seen her daughter? Janice believes he did, and he still does, because he was an angel. And that is the end of the Hospital Helpers. I hope you guys enjoyed the Hospital Helper stories, and I hope you guys have a great night's sleep. Good night, guys.